Hello, Jilly Batchelor here, travel consultant. Thank you very much for joining me. This is recorded and it'll go on my YouTube channel, so if you've missed something, don't worry, you can catch up with it there. I hope you've been enjoying today. My word, it was beautiful out. I've been out in the sunshine for a little bit, down in Brood, went to a Macmillan takeaway cake and coffee, just lovely. They raised £500, so huge shout out to Tabby for that, really good work. Okay, I've got quite a few notes today, so because there's a lot to cover. We haven't spoken for a while, and there's quite a few technical questions in here. As ever, I'm talking quite generally here, so if you've got a specific question, don't hesitate to reach out to me and I'll answer it for you, because sometimes these are quite unique scenarios to an individual. Well, first of all, I'm out of quarantine. If you follow me regularly, you know that Brian and I have been staying in the stunning Stella Island in Crete, and whilst we were there, Grant Chaps did his thing and he brought in quarantine. We're not quite sure why he did it, but he did. So I had 14 days at home. Now for me, in the background you can see my office. Some of you have been to see me here. So I'm completely isolated. Obviously I didn't have clients in the office at that time. We just did Zoom. So it was good. I've set up my little circuit training outside, but it really is a consideration, quarantine, if you are traveling, because you can't avoid it. Now we could have come back. There were flights, but we would have lost the end of our holiday, and also they were expensive, and we just thought, well, let's just go with it. Anyway, I'm home. Okay, so my first question, and I've got lots of them, so I'm going to refer to them. My first question is, what destinations are open to UK visitors? Well, I'm going to say to you, that is irrelevant. It really doesn't matter which destinations are open to us, because they may be open to us, but there may be quarantine in place, or we may still have Foreign Office guidance saying you can't travel. So right now that's irrelevant. I've been reading quite a lot of articles about we can go here and there. Well, we can't, because we've still got a lot of restrictions in place. So I would say right now, let's not even concern ourselves with this, because what we need to match, well, three things we need to match. Can we go there? Are we allowed to go there by our government? And what is the testing and what is the restrictions getting us in and out of there? So there's a lot to consider. So the first one, they may be welcoming us, but if we can't go, we're not even going to discuss them, because, if our FCO says all but essential travel, my recommendation right now is that we're not traveling. Okay, the second thing is, what is the latest FCO advice? Now, in previous videos, I've talked a lot about the travel corridors. Now, a travel corridor is a country that we can go on holiday to, but when we return from it, we do not need to quarantine. So if you go onto the Foreign and Commonwealth's website, you'll see a list. But please, please, please do exercise caution. You may not have to quarantine, but let's give you a couple of examples. For example, let's look at Mauritius in there. That is on the list. However, the borders for Mauritius are closed completely and there is no flights. Actually, you'd really struggle to book somewhere for there at the moment. But that's a really important consideration. I've had quite a few, I had a very interesting dialogue with a gent, and it was a gent. A lot of people thought it was a lady, but it wasn't. It was a gent who contacted me and said, look, Jilly, you don't know me, but apparently you give really good advice. I'm taking my wife away as a surprise. We need to go in the next couple of days. Where would you recommend? And I went through sort of the spiel, saying, well, this is what's open to us, i.e. Greece and Turkey, in terms of entry requirements. So I had a long conversation. I did a couple of quotes for Greece and Turkey. And then he didn't come back to me, so I just followed it up with an email saying, how did you get on? He said, I meant to come back to you. He said, I have booked something, but I didn't, and I found something at a really, really good price. And I went, oh, right, okay, where are you going? And he went, Cyprus. And I went, oh, okay, lovely. When are you going? He said, tomorrow. And I went, that's interesting. I said, how are you managing to get your COVID test done in time? There was a deathly silence. He goes, what do you mean? I said, well, you won't be accepted into Cyprus unless you've got a COVID test, a PCR test that is negative, otherwise you'll be turned away. I said, you probably won't even get on the flight. deathly silence once again. He said, oh, well, I don't think that can be right. He said, because they wouldn't be allowed to sell me the holiday. And I said, oh, right, fair enough. Well, I did speak to him again. He had to go and get emergency testing overnight, and it cost him over £750 to get it done. So that bargain holiday probably turned into a nightmare. I'm not sure he would have even got it back in time. So do proceed with caution, because even if the borders are open to us and we're allowed to travel and there is no quarantine, there can still be some quite hefty restrictions. Now, we've had an interesting situation with Barbados this week where we're allowed to go to Barbados. There is no quarantine on return. However, they have really ramped up their testing regime. Up until a couple of days ago, you needed to take a test before you went and you took it with you. Now you have to have a test at 5 days when you're there, and there is a question mark about what happens during that 5 days. Are you restricted to your room? We're kind of waiting for clarification on that. Needless to say, anyone that we've got booked for Barbados, we're trying to get them in elsewhere, and that's what we've been doing, because it's just too restrictive. Okay, in terms of testing, I think this is going to become absolute commonplace. Okay, and a lot of people have been contacting me who haven't booked with me about testing. Now, I don't have an affiliation with any lab, but as a network, as in not just Travel and Hayes, obviously we have a lot of people who need to be tested. And we've had a lot of success with a lab that's based in Birmingham in terms of getting the test back. One piece of advice, if you are travelling and a test has to be done, go and get it done. Don't do a postal one. That is where we're finding lots of false negatives or false positives, because people aren't testing themselves properly. Go and get it done in the lab, because they will, their nurses will do it. And obviously then there's no delay getting it there. You're not posting it off and then getting it posted back. So just a little tip there. It's not a cheap thing to do. On average, it's like £195, and the express one can be double that, as a gentleman who was going to Cyprus found out. Okay, so latest FCDO travel advice. The corridors are constantly being updated, and we're seeing countries come off and go on. Again, I can send you to the links where we are with those, but the point here is we need to marry it up with, are we welcome there? Do we have to do the quarantine, and what are the testing or entry requirements? So in September, I travelled to Crete, as you know. I also had clients travelling to Cyprus, but we were a bit more organised and we got their tests done. I had lots of people in mainland Greece, in both villas and in hotels. And also Turkey and Italy. Really, really good reports. I know it is difficult travelling right now, but if you select the right hotel, that you're going to have a decent experience still, and we're getting a lot of feedback now, so we know what's going on in these resorts. Like, for example, one of the big places that I'm promoting at the moment is St. Lucia. There are so many reasons for this. As of today, or as of this week, they have got 0 cases of COVID, so in terms of safety, it's just wonderful. But they do have restrictions in terms of going there. You need to fill in forms and various things, but you also need to have a COVID test. Fortunately, theirs is 7 days, so it gives you plenty of time. Also, we've got 4 direct flights, out of London. So we've got good flights out there, and they are just managing the situation so well. Not all hotels are open. There are designated COVID hotels. You can't hire a car. You can get taxis, but they all have to be COVID secure. They really have gone to town on this to control it, but also manage their tourist trades. Now, the hotels I've been working with in St. Lucia, we've had really, really good feedback. But I have heard quite a lot of negativity, and I'm not going to say which hotels that these are. I think that's for you to do your investigation. Obviously, you're booking through me, and it's not places that I would necessarily recommend to you. What they're saying is when you're there, you will have temperature checks, and some hotels it's once a day, some it's twice. And this particular hotel these guests were staying in, not clients of mine, were saying it was just so frustrating because they were queuing for hours, having temperature checks, waiting for a nurse. Now, I'm not going to send any client to a hotel where we've had that kind of negative feedback. So it's really good. Most of them, these hotels have been open for months now, and we know how the buffet is working or it's not, how the restaurants are working, and sort of the general sort of standards. So I will happily introduce you to those hotels that I'm recommending. So the thing is, what can we expect at the resort? Okay, Good feedback so far. Some resorts have still got buffets. Brian and I were in Stellar Island. Buffet definitely still in the evenings and for breakfast. Yes, a la carte as well. But we had what they call sneeze screens on them, and you went into the restaurant. You didn't have to wear a mask, but you did have to wear gloves. People were so compliant. And obviously lots of hand sanitizers, but a lot of hotels have got rid of their buffets because it's too difficult to manage, or the buffet still exists, but you go and point at things and say, I'd like a bit of that and a bit of that, and they'll plate it for you. Now, in some countries, very much like we've just had introduced in the UK, is if you were going up to the buffet, you would have to wear a mask, or to the bar, but in your seat, you don't have to. The beauty of, and this has been the wonderful experience with the clients I've had in Greece, is everything is outside. They've massively ramped up the outside dining. Now, as the weather turns, this is going to be less of an option. And what we're seeing now, particularly with Greece, is that we'll start to see hotels probably closing earlier, definitely into October. And that's the case with Italy as well. And and the other big place that I've had clients going to throughout the summer and in October as well is Turkey. Now, Turkey has had quite a hiatus because it's been managing it so well. We have had such great feedback in resort in terms of the level of service and the level of safety. I've got two hotels that I'm particularly working with at the moment, which is the Max Ballet Golf and also the Max Kema. Now, these are luxurious 5-star kind of butler service type hotels. They're attractive, particularly to clients who would normally go out to the Caribbean, who perhaps don't want to do long haul at this stage, but they're two beautiful options. We've still got pretty decent weather in Turkey. In October, towards the end of the month, it can start to get a bit chilly, so do choose a hotel that's got a heated pool, but it's not bad. But as we then come into those winter months, we were hoping to get the Canary Islands back on. I have to be honest, I had been quite hopeful with this, but I've got to be honest, that window of hope has really deteriorated. I saw some stats in terms of the number of infections, and it looks like, it is so hard, it's so well above the threshold for quarantine and our FCDO advice. I just cannot see us getting them on this year, and that is hugely disappointing. Now, that is why people are really turning to the Caribbean. So in October, I've got people going to Turkey, Italy and to mainland Greece, but I've also got clients that are going to St. Lucia, as I said, is hugely popular, and Antigua. As I said, these countries are doing things well, but I appreciate it's a long way to go. But if you're looking for winter sun, I think it is going to be the Caribbean, or it's going to be Turkey or Greece, but possibly with an umbrella and a jumper. That is pretty much the choices that we've got. Okay, will I have to quarantine on the return to the UK? Well, a lot of people talk about the infection numbers per 100,000. Yes, that is an indicator, but there are so many other factors that are filtered into that. As I said, we got caught out in Crete, which was well below the 20, but we still had to quarantine. Again, as I always say this, if quarantine is an absolute deal breaker, you shouldn't be traveling, or you travel, but you recognise as soon as that we get that advice that we basically get you on the plane. So if you're going potentially for a 10-night break and we get the announcement that you have to quarantine, we get you on a flight. We've had a lot of success with that. It's not a cheap thing to do, and also you lose the end of your holiday. So that is a risk, but it is possible, and I've got people travelling on that basis. I would say if quarantine is a real deal breaker, then choose somewhere like St. Lucia, for example, where the likelihood of quarantine is so low, because right now they've got 0 incidents of COVID, and even if they're unlucky, it'll only be a handful. So do bear that in mind. Don't travel if it's a deal breaker, or be prepared to return early. Typically we get 48 hours notice, so it isn't long. Okay, will my travel insurance cover me? This is such a contentious issue. I'm a member of a lot of forums on Facebook, and I am a member of a Lanzarote forum, Canary Islands. Can't go, or against FCDO advice. A lot of people still travelling there from the UK because they've got homes there. Ryanair are still running flights, and they're telling me that they can buy a travel insurance and they're covered. They're not. And, it's beyond frustrating. They said, but, we've gone to the post office and they've said they'll insure us. Yes, they will insure you. Okay, so let's look at it. They were booking a trip to Lanzarote. They weren't leaving until December, so they were buying their travel insurance now. They will absolutely give you insurance because you might break your leg or your ankle or something could happen which you would have under your travel insurance that will prevent you from travelling, and it gives you protection from that. But it clearly states in the terms and conditions, if the FCO says no travel, that policy is invalidated. They kept telling me, oh, it's covered for COVID. Yes, it's covered for COVID, but only if you're allowed to travel. So really do look at the small print. I've been quite frustrated with this week. I have not found any policies except very specialist ones, and they do have quite a lot of exclusions, then that will cover you. So if you are going against FCO advice, then really we need to have a conversation. You need to be really aware about what the genuine risks are, because these people who were going to Lanzarote were saying, well, we're not bothered because the Canarian government is covering us for COVID. So if we got sick with COVID, they've got an insurance policy, they will cover our medical costs and they will repatriate us. And I said, great, what happens if you break your leg in Lanzarote? Well, our other insurance will cover you. No, it won't, because you're travelling against advice. So yes, and to be honest, the risk of being in some sort of silly accident, you had a few cocktails, is much higher than contracting COVID. So, you really need to think this through. Again, reach out to me. I have a policy that I use through Hayes, but there are plenty of other ones on the market which are equally as good. So, yeah, and I can definitely point you in the direction. I can't recommend or advise, but I can tell you the ones that I've come across and the kind of things, and you can look and compare yourself. Okay, what financial protection do I have? Now, this has been a really interesting one this week. A colleague of mine, so as you know, I'm a personal travel consultant with Not Just Travel. So there's lots of us throughout the country, and obviously we speak to one another, which is great because we can, we can't be all over everything. And she has booked a trip for some very good clients of hers to Barbados, but their friends have booked through another travel agent. Now, there's a lot of unknowns with Barbados at the moment with that second testing and the potential quarantine between the first and second test. So with the supplier, who is gold medal in this case, is one that we use a lot, it's a trade-only supplier, my colleague was able to say to the client, look, we don't know what the situation is. We don't know whether you're going to have to quarantine in resort, and there is not enough time to gather this information for sure. So our recommendation to you is that we look, at cancellation. Now, normally, you wouldn't be able to cancel in that situation because FCO says you can travel, you can in theory travel, it's just that the experience when you get there is not great. But this particular supplier was able to work with us and the client could then cancel. No, they didn't get a refund because you won't, but what they did get is a full credit note so they could rebook. Now, they were tied into the original flights, which were Virgin, but the way that I sit with it, they spent £10,000 on a beautiful holiday. They've got no idea whether they've got to quarantine or not. No, they're not going to get a cash refund, but they've got a voucher and then they can rebook for next year. These vouchers have typically got a minimum of 12 months. Probably with the flights, it's more like 18 months. Now, the friends that they're booking with are still having to go because that isn't an option on the table. So it varies massively, and it really does depend whether your travel agent is going to go into bat for you, because a lot of these, it's not clear, so you need them to negotiate on your behalf. So in terms of the big things in terms of protection, if you buy a package, now you may have seen that both Love Holidays and On the Beach have rescinded their ABTA membership. And the reason is because they're refusing to refund. Now, the guidance is they should be, but they're refusing to do it. I'm not going to go through why that is on this video. They've got some good reasons. It's not great for the client, it's good for them. But you need to be sure that if you're booking something as a package, that's not going to happen. Now, all of my clients, bar one, is getting a full refund. We've got a slight challenge with one of them, but I'm absolutely confident it'll be resolved. Nothing to do with the client. It's to do with the contractual relationship with Hayes, but we're getting there and we're getting resolved on it. But you can imagine how many I've had to refund and change, and only to have a genuine problem with one, I'm quite proud of, and I'm 100% sure that will be resolved and they will get a full cash refund. It's just taking longer than it should. So in terms of financial protection, ATOL is really important right now. This is when you buy a flight and a hotel and a transfer and it's covered as a package, you get ATOL protection. ATOL protects you if that company fails, okay? So if the airline failed, like Thomas Cook did, or the holiday operator failed, you would have a refund via the CAA, which is essentially backed by the government, okay? A lot of people think that ATOL gives them protection for refunds and stuff. It's only there in terms of company failure, but it's really important right now because companies are failing and there's just no way of getting around that. And we will see airline failure as well, I'm absolutely sure. So ATOL is essential. Make sure you're booking with a ABTA license or bonded company that is going to maintain that membership, because then you know you've got additional protections. In terms of cancellations and refunds, if you've got a package and it's an ABTA company, FCDO says no travel, it will be cancelled and it will be refunded. So this is really important in terms of what you're booking, but these are discussions to have at the time of booking. I go through a lot of scenarios with my clients, because a lot of people are talking about a new UK lockdown and what will that mean? Well, if the UK is in lockdown, everything is cancelled and it means we go back to all, nobody can travel anywhere and everything is cancelled again and refunded. Where there has been a grey area at the moment is with local lockdowns, because for example, in Wales, the Welsh Government says you can't travel. If you're in Bolton, the Bolton website says you can. So, I mean, these are quite nuanced, and that is really when you need to be working with a travel agent that you can trust, who has got your back and who can really look after your interests and negotiate on your behalf. I don't personally think you'll get a cash refund if you go into a local lockdown, but I think if you're working with a good travel agent, you'll get a credit or you'll get a rebooking or an amend. I mean, it shouldn't be a total loss. Certainly none of mine have been. So, and that would be very unfortunate if it was. Okay, yeah, and that is an absolute canter through where we are. In terms of those places we can travel, they are reducing. In terms of the restrictions as we go in terms of testing, that is increasing. But what I will say to you is that every client that I've had traveling, and if you're nervous about it, I can certainly introduce them, and I can, can speak to you, or that you can speak to them about what that experience was like. But it has been resoundingly good. I mean, I went to Crete, I had an amazing time. Hotel was beautiful, I felt very safe and secure, but I went out and about. If you saw my videos, we went out on our bikes, we did walking, we did all sorts of things, and the restaurants, everyone was very mindful with masks, and there was a lot of cleaning and such like, so we felt very safe. However, in St. Lucia, for example, you're not allowed out and about. So there were people complaining they went to a very small hotel, they didn't realise they wouldn't be allowed out. But if you read the government's advice, it's very clear. So it's important to know what to expect. But for my clients that are going to St. Lucia, predominantly they're going to Sandals, so they're just going to live in a beautiful bubble for a week or 2 weeks. They're going to enjoy the butler service, they're going to enjoy the sunshine and the warm sea. They're not going out, they're not looking to go out and about. But unfortunately, this isn't the time for exploring in lots of places, though that was an option in Crete. It's not in a lot of the Caribbean islands. Okay, that is an absolute canter through where we are. Reach out to me if there is something you specifically want to know. Remember that this is fast moving. So if you have booked something, what I recommend you do is go on to the Government Foreign and Commonwealth Office, and you can go onto your country. Say, for example, you were going to St. Lucia, you click on St. Lucia, and you can register yourself for travel updates. So that means every time something changes, you'll get an email and a notification. For me, it's really tough because I've got people going all over the place, and staying on top of it can be challenging. So we list this, the client and I do, and then we can kind of get our heads together. But that's something that's definitely worth doing because things are moving all the time. So that's it. All well and good here. I said out of quarantine. And I'm here. Do reach out to me if you've got something booked and you need a bit of advice or guidance. But also, if you're looking to book something for this year or into next, then give me a call and have a chat. What I will say is, if you are looking to book, it's essential that what you book is flexible. We don't know what's going to happen. People are travelling, and they're travelling safely, and they're having a great time. I don't want to stop you doing that, but equally things are changing and they're not able to travel. It's important that you've got protection, flexibility in place. So that's my last word. You take care, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and don't hesitate to reach out to me if there's anything I can do to assist you. And in the meantime, stay safe and well.